Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Revtalks. Today we're here with Daryn. How's it going, Daryn?
Patrick, hello. Nice to be here.
Appreciate you jumping on today and taking some time out of your day to be here as well. Give us a little background about the company and what you guys do.
Yeah, fantastic. So Zenyth is a full end-to-end web accessibility consultancy. Uh, January, we celebrated our 10th year anniversary. We came into the space pretty early, but we are very passionate, very mission-driven about helping organizations operationalize web accessibility. So think about how a blind person shops online, or people with disabilities interface with digital platforms, web and mobile. Clients come to us, when they are serious about making their technology ADA compliant, making sure that their digital platforms work for people of all abilities. And we can talk more about services and products as we move through the podcast. But we have both service offerings from auditing and code remediation and accessible web development all the way through products for the Shopify ecosystem and beyond.
So you guys service a very interesting part of the market. It's obviously part of the market that I would say is obviously predominantly underserved. So it's those with disabilities. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit, and then we'll dive into it more? So you guys provide solutions for which type of demographic again?
So yeah, this is a pretty broad conversation. So we'll start broad and drill our way down. In terms of the demographic, we're talking about the spectrum of disabilities. So predominantly, the internet really is a visual user experience. Think about how a blind person shops online. It's fascinating, right? No monitor, no mouse. So you essentially need to translate that visual user experience into an auditory user experience. I mean, we've been doing this very well for captions and transcripts for, audio for quite a while, and it's kind of potentially the most mature aspect of, the accessibility equation. Something I really want to, stress and emphasize: not all disabilities are visible, um, and not all technology specifically caters to the disability community. The aging demographic is very much part of this. First year with glasses. If I don't wear them, my first instinct on a website where the font is too small is to go to the Chrome settings and, zoom up the font to make it larger. And often when you have an inaccessible site or a site that doesn't account for usability, the breakpoints will just kind of break inconsistently and you'll have a broken user experience. That is both an example of an accessibility best practice and a usability best practice. I read a fascinating statistic. It said that for the first time in history, our population has more of our demographic over the age of 74 than under the age of 14. Incredible, right? So as our technology becomes more prolific, which it is, think of the size of the market that the disability equation addresses. It's massive. So yeah, that's a little bit around just the demographic in general, and we can certainly drill down if you have more
Definitely. Yeah.
questions.
Yeah. I appreciate you bringing
Yeah.
that to the table. That obviously makes a lot more sense. I think that helped the audience understand a little bit more kind of about the servicing of the actual customer profiles. I noticed on the
Mm,
website, you guys have some of your featured services with accessible support with components and development. And there's two
mm.
buttons that say explore components and explore development. So obviously you're servicing a very interesting demographic that is predominantly underserved. So how do you guys go about in your team and things like that, fulfilling for your services and everything like that?
Yeah. So let's kind of dive in. In order to answer this question, I'm going to just frame up some context here. So um, you're a company, you get a letter in the mail from a law firm, and a plaintiff is suing you under the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, for your technology being, non-compliant. So who are you going to call, right? you're going to call your attorney or you're going to call the company that built your website. And the reality is attorneys are going to, tap into their network of vendors. So they're going to call someone like Zenyth. And the majority of agencies and web developers don't have any accessibility experience. So they're going to look for an accessibility partner as well. So that's where Zenyth would come into the space to, service these kind of opportunities. Now, as we talk about maturing the accessibility model, we're talking about the very first part of the equation here, which is being reactive. You get a demand letter, you get a lawsuit, you react. As you kind of go down that scale of maturing, you would go to kind of, managing accessibility. Maybe your teams are talking a bit more and you're looking for ways to bring some accessibility into your best practices. And as you start to manage and look to integrate accessibility into your development workflows, you can do that, of course, through, coding, which needs to be done, of course, but you can leverage components. The reality is there's not a lot of accessible components in the marketplace. And so this is a direct tie into your question of how our development services kind of, help development teams and agencies leverage accessible code. So we can go into an agency or development shop or an organization and we can give their development teams training. We can give their development teams oversight. We can help them implement accessibility recommendations once we've done an audit. But at some point, they're going to want to absorb this knowledge, stand on their own and have a good best practices where accessibility and development are well integrated. And so that's where they can leverage, especially for e-commerce sites. On the Shopify platform, they can leverage our accessible Shopify theme. They can leverage our accessible Shopify components. And if they are on other platforms, Drupal, Magento, BigCommerce, we've gone further and developed an accessible development kit where they can take our components and kind of bolt them on into a little framework. And instead of rebuilding or having to live with broken accessibility components, they can have something that works out of the box.
So it's in the more of compliance space as well, just as much as it is reacting to a specific situation that could happen. Like when you give the example of letter in the mail, you have to now go into a reactive state to we have to go through all these different compliance things, lawyers, attorneys, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And you've turned it from that front as well to obviously have that servicing and offering to now more of a proactive approach to where that doesn't have to happen to where you're more regulated. Am I kind of following you on there?
Yeah, it doesn't have to happen, but unfortunately it does and will because the reality is accessibility initially is a little heady. It can be a little complicated until you learn, the best practices or more importantly, integrate those into your company from top down, executive culture of the company, all the way through the different divisions. You've got content, UI, UX, design, development, brand, and they all have to be able to talk to each other. Just like, you would never have a company design, for example, they'll take their logo and put it into the marketing ecosystem without making sure that brand guidelines were met and that they were not in any way, damaging the brand. I believe the same standard of care and best practice should be applied to web accessibility because it is integrated or inextricably linked, I should say, to the essence of a brand. When a company gets sued for accessibility, it can definitely tarnish their brand if they don't react accordingly and fix positively.
100%. And that being said, when you guys are looking after your customers and you guys are servicing them, how do you guys typically get in front of them initially? Is it mainly word of mouth referrals, networking, in person, things like that? What are some of the initiatives you guys are currently using as well as are looking to explore potentially in the future?
I mean, we love our channel partners. We have lovely channel partnerships with, of course, the legal sector, attorneys, and defense litigators. We only work on the defense side, by the way. Agency partners, channel partners. We love our agency partners, and also a third category, which I'm kind of calling integrators. A company that integrates technology into a digital platform in any capacity. But really, where 2026 and beyond is a focus for us is helping third-party platforms and third-party plugin providers making sure that their technology to whatever platform they're delivering. So think of, for example, plugins for WordPress or any other large CMS platform that just bolts on. These are causing a very, very significant bulk of the accessibility issues because a company builds a site, they have basic accessibility, but an inherent piece of logic from a third-party plugin is non-compliant. So, the disability journey
I
stops
see.
there.
So looking at ways to actually acquire customers through the integration and partnering with them in that sense. So it's like it's almost like a partnership, but it's like you're already embedded in them, and then by default, that's how you are already providing your service, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, we would love every company to be able to have a, capacity and budget, like a non-constraint in capacity and budget to build their own internal in-house accessibility teams, but it's not
Nice.
realistic. And
Yeah,
that's why, any service I think exists so we can help organizations supplement and enhance, essentially amplify their capabilities.
nice,
And
nice.
Zenith is certainly no exception to that.
Definitely.
Mm.
And how do you guys kind of go about pricing your services? I know there's a bunch of different ways you guys have probably gone about doing it. Play a ballpark of how you guys operate. Just kind of give us a little rundown about that.
Pricing is always interesting. Look, there is no one size fits all. You can have similar sites built on the same platform, and depending on how the developer implemented code, or kind of took a spaghetti approach and pieced it all together, or just used plugins entirely, or actually followed some good semantic HTML, structure, um, or perhaps used a more modern like React front end that is highly, um, customizable and works well with accessibility. These kind of factor into pricing. What we do is, because this is such an unknown, Zenith offers, free estimates, and essentially an analysis to all of our prospects and clients. So we'll go in, we'll review the entire site, build a sitemap, we'll surf all the workflows, and we'll make sure we go through all the kind of like complex patterns and really dial in every page of the user experience, and then come up with a fixed time, fixed cost for auditing and remediating um, a digital platform, web and mobile. The reality is, Patrick, sometimes, especially on older systems that just don't scale up or are not customizable to accessibility, it becomes a conversation around rebuilding, getting a little more modern. Very, very helpful if a company's at the intersection of a rebrand, redesign, or re-architecturing of their platform. It's the best time to actually build in accessibility.
Nice.
Um, and I appreciate you asking that question. And I just want to chat a little bit about, maturing the accessibility model. So if now's a good time, I can jump in, and if not, just if you could fold that into the segment when you have a
Yeah, go ahead.
moment.
Go ahead.
So thank you. So we were talking earlier about, this initial phase of being reactive to getting a demand, a lawsuit, and trying to respond without any internal structure, and moving through kind of, getting to a management level of trying to manage that, getting to a level where you're trying to integrate that into operations. Zenith plays at the next level very well, which is operationalizing accessibility. So what that means is, how do you enable teams across an organization? We work with middle market and enterprise organizations, um, as an end customer, you know, not our channel partners. So, how do you operationalize accessibility into an organization that has a lot of moving parts, complexities, budgets, a lot of people that are not always aligned? And there is definitely an art and a science to this. And I think the last decade of doing several hundred, projects at this point has helped us dial this in, and moving through that into the last phase, which is real integration. And so at this point, you have mature processes, you've got training, you've got monthly compliance monitoring, you have your audits and your remediation. You are potentially leveraging as much, accessible component and architecture as you can. you've created usable libraries, and you're using accessibility in a lovely way, and you're not in a reactive phase anymore. And so it's taken a decade to be able to see the through line here. But finally, we're at the point where we can actually start to visualize, or not just visualize, but formalize what those last, two
Yeah.
legs of the accessibility journey really look like. Operationalizing and truly integrating into an organization for long-term compliance.
Nice. And I'm sure it definitely varies too, especially once when you deal with, like you said, 50 to 100 companies that you've installed that up market, especially on enterprise level. So you have a good sort of repeatable process and a predictable model of, okay, well, this is going to happen whenever we sign you. Here's some things we're going to run into. Here's going to happen here. Here's kind of how we go about doing that. I did have a
Yeah.
question too about because obviously I assume you have more of a technical background than a sales or marketing background, I'd assume, or maybe I could be wrong.
Entrepreneurs tend to have a pretty broad range.
True.
When I don't want to date myself here, but many years ago when I graduated university, I had enough electives initially and take enough classes to be able to just take a few more and get a double major and a minor across international business, international marketing, and information systems.
Nice. Okay.
And
So
I
it makes
thought, what am I possibly going to do with that? And this was like, almost the dawn of the internet, and was a perfect vehicle to kind of leverage all of those skills. And through that, of course, no business runs without sales. So business development is always a part of it.
definitely.
And I don't like to think of it as being a salesperson, as opposed to more of an ambassador for accessibility.
I see. I
You
see.
know,
Okay. Yeah. Definitely a different way to position it for sure. I see
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the reason why I ask this because are you familiar with Lovable?
Lovable. Yes, we use it.
Okay, interesting. I'm curious about your thoughts because there's a lot of people, especially in today's day and age, and maybe a lot of the audience as well, that are maybe getting into sort of the digital technical integrations automation space. And obviously now more than ever, even the past 2 or 3 decades, there's a lot more opportunity in terms of speed to get these things to market, to build these tools. I mean, you can build a website on Lovable. You prompt in 5 minutes, and you have a website, connect your domain to it. Whereas obviously in the past, you had to do a lot with records and coding and everything like that. So how do you see sort of the opportunity now with the marketplace? Maybe somebody who's jumping into it. Do you think they can grow faster, especially in today's day and age, as opposed to maybe a decade or two ago? Or if you had to start all over again and obviously you were placed in today's marketplace, what would you kind of do differently if you were to do anything differently?
Yeah, what a time to be alive in this technology era. The amount of uh, raw processing power and app driven potential we have in our technology space is unprecedented, right?
Yeah,
So, look, here's the bottom line: you cannot just push a button and achieve accessibility. There are AI tools out there trying very hard to brand themselves as, single line of code and install a widget on your site, and they are making promises for compliance, but the reality is that that doesn't work. AI widgets and accessibility overlays can solve some usability issues and certainly do have some validity to them across some specific use cases. The disability community reports that they often introduce more barriers to an accessible experience than they solve.
I see.
That's on that side of the equation. On the app side of the equation, um, yeah, go ahead and use these tools to build concepts. Use these tools to flush out, a little framework or a direction to where you want to go. But if you're not building accessibility fundamentals from the ground up, so that would be first pixel down. So your brand guidelines, your color palette needs to be accessible from the ground up. If you're not putting that color palette, or at least verifying that your colors are ADA compliant from the beginning of your build, it doesn't matter. You're non-compliant. If these apps are not building semantically well-structured semantic HTML and CSS that has accessibility factored into it, it's not going to be accessible. And this is actually a huge challenge. I mean, obviously the opportunity is there for us too, but this is a huge challenge for Zenyth. We are not able to just go and use any of these marketplace ready apps to just build marketing pages and landing pages and just drop them rapidly because they are not compliant. And then that would be very hypocritical of us to be an accessibility company, but our content out there
You'd be
is
doing a
not.
disservice to your customers almost.
Exactly. It's an integrity issue. So
Yeah.
it takes us, we've built all our own products. We have several SaaS platforms at this point. We built them all in-house. My team is amazing.
Nice.
Takes us a lot of time and effort and resources and passion for accessibility to make sure that we can put our full ADA compliance stamp on our own products.
Right.
And we don't just hold our clients to this standard. Of course, we hold ourselves to the same standard, which that's what integrity means, right? But it is unfortunately way too easy to push a button and vibe code something out. It's not going to be compliant. Now, if you had a team, this is where it gets exciting. If you had a team that knew accessibility well, could build some pretty granular, rule sets in Cursor, for example, on the development side, and had enough knowledge to integrate their experience, their accessibility, and their coding into some AI rule sets where they could look at the output and go, no, that's not quite right. Fine tune, hand code. They could leverage AI for about 40% of their development work, which is significant. Imagine a company getting a 40% boost in revenue, right? It's a lot.
Absolutely.
So this is
Yeah.
a 40% boost in production through AI tools if you have the right team, the knowledge, the best practices, and the protocols, procedures in house to make sure the output is conformant,
True,
right?
true. And I think the similarity with that and kind of what we do with some more of email marketing and inbox management is a bit of an overlap too, because we
Mm,
can save 40% of time when it comes down to prompting AI to create specific copy from a generator
yeah,
that's
yeah.
human like. And so that cuts the time. And obviously human needs to look after it, needs to tweak it, needs to do those additional things before launch. But streamlining like onboarding form and getting customer persona and information from a customer and then plugging that to a specific campaign that's proven to work, AI can handle that. And so that takes a lot of manual time, as you know. And then obviously that's able to be streamlined. So it's very
Mm.
interesting how different parts of the business, I see it as AI is patching it up, can patch up parts of the business and then bring it together, as like a connector almost.
Absolutely. Look, AI hallucinations are real. There's no consequences when it's content because hallucinated content sounds like poetry, right?
Yeah.
There's no downside. There's big consequences when people are using AI to represent them in as their lawyer, as their legal
Yeah.
aid. There's big
Yeah.
consequences when it comes to
When you bring ChatGPT to court and ask it to,
yeah, or and also when you're using AI for accessibility because it it it, it lacks. AI is really good at pattern recognition, but it lacks an essential human element, a trait that can never be duplicated in AI, and that's context, right? That's what makes us human. I can look at you, I can read your face, I can feel your body language. We can be, in person, and you can get an energetic read. You can hear something from someone and be like, oh, I on a human level, I understand what it is. That's where AI can't close the gap. So, look, I made this decision 10 years ago, but we decided from day one that we would never decouple the human element from the accessibility equation. So no matter how much automation there is, I'm
right.
going to take it to a point and we're going to stop. We're at automation right now. We're getting close to 50% on the coding side. QA
Nice.
side, probably 40%. But when we get to 70%, there's no reason to go any further. You need a lived and a shared experience to validate that, yes, this is actually usable for the demographic that you serve. And that can never be replaced by code, right?
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And where can we find you guys on the internet? What is the website and what's your LinkedIn for the audience?
Wonderful, wonderful. Zenithgroup.com is our digital home. Uh, mostly LinkedIn. If anybody wants to reach out on LinkedIn and connect, I'd love to have a chat. I'd also like to offer anybody that finds this conversation, um, you know, complimentary scans of any of their digital platforms. We have a wonderful tool that we've built that can identify, on an automated level, a good 40% of defects, and also a complimentary manual assessment of a couple of pages of their site. It could easily be a $1,500 value that would take some time to just really give you some valuable feedback. My advice to anybody listening is go and use the Wave tool or the Google Lighthouse tool, the Xcore tool. Scan your site and get your team to fix anything that can be automatically detected. Get that out the way, put a stake in the ground, begin the journey, and then come to Zenyth and we'll take you the rest of the way.
Sweet. Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to join up on Revtalks, Daryn. I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon or evening.
Amazing, Patrick. I enjoyed our chat. Thank you for the thoughtful questions.